You are listening to Tell Me I'm Not Invisible. Chapter 47, Someone Saved My Life. Chapel Hill, December 12th to 22nd, 2019. I want to tell you about the night I decided to stay. It was December. The therapy with Andrea had been going for about a year and a half. The EMDR had opened material I had not been able to access before, specific memories that had been stored in the body rather than in language, images, and sensations from 2000 and 2004 and 2003 that returned during processing sessions with the particular vividness of things that have been held under pressure for a long time. I was not doing well in the conventional sense. I was doing the work which sometimes looks like the opposite of doing well. I had separated from Ailey and understood that a divorce was coming. I had been in contact with a law firm about the 2006 conviction, about whether there was any legal path forward, any mechanism that might address what the record said about me. They told me there was nothing that could be done, nothing at all. I did not know yet about a motion for appropriate relief. I only knew what that firm had told me, which was that the door was closed. I had survived a great deal by then. Nearly 20 years of carrying a record that said something that had not happened. Every background check, every job application, every moment of calculating whether to disclose and what disclosing would cost me. The false conviction was not in the past. It was present tense. It followed me into every professional context I tried to rebuild. It had cost me jobs, relationships, the ability to move through the world with the ordinary confidence that comes from not having to hide what is true about you. I felt hopeless about the conviction ever being addressed. I felt hopeless about ever connecting with anyone in the way I had once connected, genuinely, without the weight of the record in the room. I felt hopeless about doing anything meaningful, about being seen without being judged by what the official record said I was. I had reached the point where continuing to live inside all of it had begun to feel impossible. I was admitted to a psychiatric facility on December 12th. I had made an attempt to end my life. I'm going to say that plainly rather than softening it, because softening it would be dishonest. And this book has tried throughout to be honest about the cost of what happened to me. The attempt was not a performance or a gesture. It was the expression of a specific accumulated exhaustion, the particular weight that builds when you have been surviving for 20 years without the thing that makes survival feel worthwhile, and when the one legal path you knew about has just been closed, and when you are newly alone, and when the body that has been holding all of it has finally run out of reasons to keep holding it. I went in. I stayed for 10 days. The unit had its own rhythms, the way institutional settings always do. Meals at certain hours, groups at certain hours, the particular quality of time in a place where the ordinary structure of days, work, errands, the small decisions that fill a life, has been suspended, and what remains is just the present moment and whoever is in it with you. It was a Sunday night becoming Monday when Kira came out. I was in the common area, awake when I should probably have been sleeping. She came out of her room and saw me and said simply, "You can't sleep either." I said no. She sat down. We started talking the way people talk at that hour, without the usual social scaffolding, without the careful management of what to say and what to withhold. Something about midnight in a psychiatric unit removes certain permissions and grants others. You are already in the place where people go when things have become too much. There's no longer any use in pretending they haven't. I told her something true. I told her about the conviction, not the full legal history, not the way I might have laid it out for a lawyer or a judge, but the essential facts. I had been falsely accused. The case had gone forward without evidence. I had been convicted of something I did not do. I had spent nearly 20 years carrying a record that was a lie. A law firm had just told me there was nothing that could be done about it. I told her I was not someone who would hurt another person. I told her this not as a legal argument, but as the most basic true thing about myself. the thing I had known since I was a child, hiding behind a telephone pole in a neighborhood that felt too large and too loud, since I had made a vow in the quiet of my bedroom that I would never make anyone feel unsafe because of me. That vow had held. It had held through everything, and the record said otherwise, and I had been living inside that contradiction for 20 years, and the weight of it was what had brought me here. She listened. She did not reach for professional neutrality or careful hedging. She looked at me and said, "I believe you, 100%. I want to be careful here about what those words did and did not do. They did not resolve the legal situation. They did not change the record. They did not mean that everything that had followed from the conviction could now be undone. A law firm had told me 12 days earlier that nothing could be done, and Kira's belief did not make that untrue in any practical sense. What it did was something different and in some ways more necessary. I had been carrying the weight of not being believed for nearly 20 years, by courts, by the licensing board, by the evaluators who had assessed me during the worst 2 months of my life, without asking a single question about what those months had contained, by my own family, who had received the information about what had happened to me and responded with the emotional equivalent of a processing notice. I had sat in rooms again and again where the official version of events had more authority than my direct knowledge of what had actually occurred. One person in a psychiatric facility at midnight looked at me and said she believed me without qualification, without the careful hedge that says, "I believe you feel this is true," without the implicit suggestion that the record and my account might each be partially right. She believed me, 100%. Shortly after that, she invited me to join her at her table for meals on the unit. That invitation, the simple, practical, daily act of "come sit with me," was its own form of being believed. Not the dramatic version, not the public exoneration I had needed for 20 years. Just a person who had heard my story and decided, without ambivalence, that she wanted to be near me, that I was someone worth sitting next to, that the record did not tell the truth about who I was. I had not been certain, going in, that anything could help. I had believed, somewhere in the exhaustion of that December, that even if I survived the hospitalization, I would be exactly where I had been when I entered it, still carrying the record, still without a legal path forward, still alone, still invisible in the specific way that comes from having the official account of your life contradict the actual one. I had thought the hospital might not change anything, and that the hopelessness waiting on the other side of it would be indistinguishable from the hopelessness that had brought me in. Kira's words changed the calculation, not by solving anything external, by demonstrating that it was still possible for someone to hear the true story and believe it, that the weight I had been carrying was not invisible to everyone, that there was at least one person in the world, found at midnight in a common room, who had looked at me and seen someone telling the truth. That was enough to decide to stay. A few days into the stay, I was watching television in the common room. Law and Order SVU was on. An episode about a false accusation, a person whose life had been dismantled by something that had not happened. I watched it and felt something open in me. Not because the fictional story was my story in its particulars, but because seeing it treated seriously, seeing a false accusation portrayed as a genuine, devastating harm rather than a footnote or a misunderstanding, gave me a side door into my own experience. Fiction sometimes makes it possible to say the true thing by first saying it about someone else. The story on the screen was not mine, but it was recognizable, and recognition, after years of having my experience treated as implausible or irrelevant, was itself a form of relief. When the episode ended, I turned to the other patients who had been watching and said, "That happened to me. What you just watched, someone's life being destroyed by a false accusation. That happened to me. The room was quiet for a moment. Then they responded. Not with skepticism, not with the careful neutrality that institutions train people to perform around difficult claims, but with something much simpler. They believed me. They said they were sorry. They said it with the directness of people who had no stake in the official version, who were responding to a person in front of them rather than to a record. "I'm sorry that happened to you," someone said, and meant it. I knew I had been a therapist. They knew it too, and they had offered me something I had spent years offering others, the simple, unconditional act of believing someone when they tell you who they are. Near the end of the stay, in a group session, one of the other patients looked at me and said, "You're like a social butterfly. You talk to everyone." I sat with that for a moment. I had been admitted because the weight of invisibility had become unsurvivable. I had felt, in the most literal possible sense, that I could not continue to exist as someone whose true story had no witnesses, whose professional identity had been stripped away, whose attempts at connection kept running into the wall of what the record said. I had felt invisible in the deepest way, not merely unseen, but actively erased by the official account of who I was. And this woman, looking at me from across the room, had seen someone who moved easily between people, who brought something to the room that the room responded to, who talked to everyone. Both things were true simultaneously. I felt invisible, and others could see my effect on the room. The title of this book did not resolve by having the world finally see me clearly. It resolved by showing that visibility and invisibility can coexist, that you can feel erased and still be present, still be affecting people, still be leaving something in a room that matters to the people in it. I left on December 22nd. I had gone in after an attempt to end my life. I came out having decided to stay. Those are not the same thing, and the distance between them is where Kira lives, at a common room table at midnight, with her 4 words and the invitation that followed. I believe you, 100%. Come sit with me. This has been a chapter from Tell Me I'm Not Invisible. Watch as I read the book from the beginning by visiting bwlinks.me/NIA.